Yeah, it's
Okay,
very cool.
we are recording and we're going to start. And I'm going to share my slides with you. So just 1 second, please. Welcome to the Hearthstone University's Film School. Go ahead and share that. Can everybody see the slideshow?
Yep.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So I need to thank the Hearthstone for letting me put this on. Thank you all for coming. My name is Alan. Today's movie is a better remake of a great newspaper film, His Girl Friday, which premiered on January 11th, 1940 at the Radio City Music Hall Theater in New York, New York. That's 81 little years ago. But let's dial it back to today. What are we doing here? This is the Hearthstone University Film School, brought to you by the Movie Committee. We pick the movie as a group. I present the movie as a me. We watch the movie as a group, and then we discuss and end with lots of trivia nuggets. Knowledge in Nature's Neighborhood, as we try to call it here. Our next feature in the Hearthstone University Film School is going to be Gene Kelly and Stanley Donin's Singing in the Rain, the best musical ever made, also one of the best films ever made. And a very funny top film, according to the American Film Institute, the British Film Institute, all the lists that matter really, and our very own movie committee, which matters the most, and a history lesson on the transition to sound films. Of course, it stars Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, Donald O'Connor, and Gene Hagen. See them here on April 28th. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to talk at you for about another 5 minutes, and then we will jump into the film. So we're dialing it back to 1940, as I said, when you could buy a house for $3,920. Gas was 11 cents a gallon, rent's $30 a month, and a new car is $850 on average. War is raging in Europe, and we have our first peacetime military draft in the US history. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is our first third-term president. He would go on to be a fourth-term president as well, as we all know. We first experienced the 40-hour work week and nylons. We also enjoy on the charts listening to Glenn Miller and Bing Crosby, who you can see depicted there together. And hot off of a year that produced Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, 1939. Some consider it the best movie year of all time. January 11th, we have the fastest comedy ever made, His Girl Friday. So how does it begin? It begins in 1929 as the stage farce. Former reporters and soon-to-be major screenwriters Charles MacArthur and Ben Hecht's The Front Page, which Charles Lederer and Bartlett McCormick adapt to film in 1931 under Lewis Milestone's direction, as produced by Howard Hughes. Yes, that Howard Hughes. By two newspapermen, about two newspapermen. Howard Hawks will adapt. Many of you are familiar with Howard Hawks. Those of you who don't know him too well, a little refresher, Leonard Maltin called him the greatest American director who is not a household name. He was director, producer, and screenwriter of roughly 40 classic Hollywood westerns, films noir, crime films, science fiction, and screwball comedies. And screwball comedy is the direct precursor of the romantic comedy. And that's what we're looking at today. So hot off of one of the first screwball comedies he makes, that's 20th Century. You can see that on the left side of your screen. And one of the best, many consider the best comedy ever made, Bringing Up Baby, in 1938, so 34, 38. And long before he'd make The Big Sleep and before he'd make John Wayne a star in 1948's Red River, one of our best directors, whom the French will dub an auteur. Auteur is just the French word for author, meaning that he makes highly individualized films of an excellent quality. Howard Hawks is hosting a dinner party, and the topic of dialogue is brought up. He pulls up a copy of The Front Page to demonstrate the snappy exchanges between characters taking the role of Burns. A female guest, unknown, takes Hildy. A bit later, going over it with his secretary, Hawks realizes the dialogue sounds much better with a female reading and quickly secures the rights from Howard Hughes. Any questions so far? We're about halfway into the woods. So Ben Hecht, remember the original writer, who Godard, Jean-Luc Godard of the French New Wave, said was responsible for 80% of Hollywood's best films. Not accurate, but you get the spirit. He approves the gender change, so it's not about two men anymore, it's about a man and a woman. And Hawks has two more ideas. One, hire Cary Grant to be, quote, wonderful in a loathsome sort of way. And two, have Walter and Hildy step on each other's lines, starting to talk before each finishes. Can you imagine anybody but Cary Grant in this role? So, how about Katharine Hepburn, Carole Lombard, Ginger Rogers, Claudette Colbert, Irene Dunne, Joan Crawford, and Jean Arthur? They all turned the role of Hildy down. You can see Irene Dunne in here in The Awful Truth, which is one of the great screwball comedies of all time. And of course, who we end up with is Rosalind Roz Russell. Any questions so far?
Nope.
All right. So hot off of being Sylvia Fowler in The Women, 1939, this is her 21st film. And this is really where her boss lady roles begin. And it's ahead, and she would, of course, go on to star in Auntie Mame and many other things we'll talk about at the end of our screening. So the film is ahead of its time. People don't quite get this classic then. I'll tell you how it did and has done since then. Questions to ponder and things to notice. Think about that screenplay. Why is it Quentin Tarantino's favorite screenplay? Little hint, there's a lot of talking in his movies. Screwball was birthed, as most of us may know, with 1934's It Happened One Night. And according to the writer Saul Austerlitz, married the physical ingenuity of silent slapstick with the dazzling cascades of verbal wit associated with the New York stage. So think about where you noticed this in His Girl Friday. And we'll also discuss the comedy of remarriage, which is a subgenre of the screwball comedy. And Hawks said, quote, well, now it took you a minute and 10 seconds to do that scene. Do it in 60 and we'll print it. I think movies are just too damn slow. So we'll discuss that. We'll discuss feminism. I'll also share some trivia, including some about Ralph Bellamy and something that the censors missed. See if you can find that. And I'm going to take down this PowerPoint and see if anybody is waiting to get in. Looks like everybody is in. Excellent. And any questions before we jump into His Girl Friday? Okay. So let me share a different screen. Where are we here? That's the one I want to share. Okay. Sorry, this is the first time I've done this here, so it's just taken me a second. Okay, so as I said, I'll share some trivia. Think about something that the censors would not have been happy about. Remember, the code passed in 1934, and it took out a lot of the, quote, offensive things in it. And strap on your safety belts. We're going to talk about Quentin Tarantino's favorite screenplay in just 92 minutes. So here we go.
I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted.
That was it. It was a 2-hour movie in 90 minutes.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, I've got a few words to say at you as far as how it did at the time, and then we can have our discussion. So did anybody notice the little bit that got past the censors that the censors may not have been happy about in retrospect?
Reference to Pickaninny?
No, it wasn't that.
1940 wasn't it?
Going out the suicide out the window?
No.
Okay, so when they, near the end, then they talked about staying in that hotel, and she said we could have gone to jail for this.
There are a lot of things like that. A lot of things like that. But here's from the New York Times 1939 review, or 1940 review, sorry. The celebrated curtain line about the so-and-so stealing the watch has gone by the board, the state censor board, but they have another just as cute if you can hear it. So in the newsroom, the reporters are playing poker, and one of them calls out to the reporter McHugh, played by the great Roscoe Carnes, who is so wonderfully sleazy, and it happened one night as well. He's sitting by the window that looks on a staircase. Hey, Mac, no response. Hey, Stairway Sam, would you mind turning on some lights? In the background of these newsroom scenes, McHugh, or Stairway Sam, is trying to look up the women's dresses as they go up the staircase. Even during one of the few serious moments in the film, just after Molly Malloy confronts the newsmen with their lies, Stairway Sam can't help himself. Not to mention he's flirting with and chatting up every woman who walks by. This was probably something that got by the Hays office censors of the time. So there were a bunch of things, but that was the main big one. So how did the girl do? His Girl Friday did not even break the top 20 for the year, believe it or not. It was up for 0 awards. So like these things are sometimes, it was very ahead of its time. Since then, of course, it's one of the funniest films of all time, according to AFI, American Film Institute's number 19 funniest film. Premiere voted the film one of the 50 greatest comedies of all time in 2006. Voted number 10 in Total Film's 100 greatest movies of all time list in 2005, and then preserved in 1993 by the Library of Congress. It is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite films, which figures The Guardian's 13th funniest. And now that you've seen it with fresh eyes, what I'd like to do is go around person to person, if you'd like, and just kind of give a name and a thumbs direction. Although all of your names are there, so you maybe don't have to give your name if you don't want to. But I would like to know how people saw it, if it was the first time they saw it, and what they thought.
It's the first time I have seen it. I really liked watching Rosalind Russell and I just forgot his name, the actor star. I thought that was really interesting. And then Bruce was such a easygoing guy. I liked him too. I thought the storyline was very, very funny and helpful. And it kind of showed all the difference now in the news, in the telephones, and the having to call the desk, not just picking up on someone's Twitter account. So I thought it was a little long, but I enjoyed it.
And it does feel that way. It's only 92 minutes though. Isn't that wild?
It seemed longer.
Yeah. I have some things to say about that. Anybody else have some?
I thought the interesting part of the interesting thing was how they got all that dialogue in, and you could still understand most of it.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of it seemed to be shot in one long segment.
Oh, yeah.
You don't catch very many broken spots where they had to patch things together, except the sound went out there a couple times. I don't know what that was about.
That's a really good point. And the screenplay was 191 pages. A regular screenplay, average screenplay these days, 95 to 125, and comedies are usually shorter. So 92 minutes of comedy in 191 pages is absolutely nuts, which is probably why it felt a little tiring, maybe to some people. And this is all from 1929's The Front Page, Ben Hecht's Broadway play, which some people have called the biggest influence on 20th century screenplays and plays. So there's all kinds of stuff in there. Did anyone notice music during the film? Usually music is a pretty constant thing.
The music seemed like it just came on at the very end there. I wasn't aware of it during the rest of.
Yeah, there was hardly any of it.
That sort of that romantic thing at the very end. It kind of changed the mood.
So it's only in the first and last 2 minutes of the film. So a lot of people have called, a lot of critics and writers have called the dialogue the music of this film. It kind of matches the rat-a-tat-tat of the typewriter, which is a trope of this genre. As I mentioned at the beginning, Saul Austerlitz, who's a great writer on comedy and film, said screwball comedy married the physical ingenuity of silent slapstick with the dazzling cascades of verbal wit associated with the New York stage. So music. And so why do you think this would be one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies, knowing what we know about Quentin Tarantino? His screenplays also tend to be pretty long. He loves talky movies.
Kind of they argue in a constant back and forth and arguing is kind of like Tarantino, except he kills them off.
Right. Although I thought he showed commendable restraint in his most recent movie, ending it when he did. So the New York Times at the time, the 1940 Frank Nugent review, he was the other guy who did reviews in addition to Bosley Crowther. He likened the film to a communicable disease. The reviewer, that's then. A contemporary review to us by Ty Burr of the New York Times said, young people sometimes complain that old movies are slow. Show them this one, they'll get whiplash. So Hawks had told Peter Bogdanovich, who wrote a book about him, quote, I had noticed that when people talk, they talk over one another, especially people who talk fast or who are arguing or describing something. So we wrote the dialogue in a way that made the beginnings and ends of sentences unnecessary. They were there for overlapping. Editing is irrelevant, quick cuts, it's all about splicing the dialogue together. To me, it sounds more like reality. It was how people actually talked. So that comes from the play and so forth. Howard Hawks was a director who is noted, he's kind of contrasted to Hitchcock. Hitchcock had all the flashy style, he had weird angles and shadows and stuff. Howard Hawks, you almost can't tell he's doing anything, but he does that in order to focus on the story. And another thing that he did, and Rosalind Russell got really upset about this, is he would slump down in his chair, way down, and just let the scenes go on in order to let people ad-lib. And does anybody remember the scene where Hildy throws the purse at Walter Burns?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Cary Grant ad-libs because she was getting frustrated with the dialogue and with how quick it was. So she ad-libs the throwing the purse, and he ad-libs, you're losing your arm. You used to be better than that.
Yeah.
So we have a director who makes ad-libbing a competition sport, a 191-page script, and basically you usually have 1 page per minute of screen time. That's kind of the equation. But here we've got a 92-minute film. So, and of course there's all the fighting. Want my fingerprints? No, I've still got those, right? What do we think of all that fighting?
It's kind of like a prize fight. You know, there are a lot of jabs that miss the mark, and there are a few that really sock you. But it's constant motion. It's the freneticism of the film that I'm not sure I've ever seen a film that is as frenetic as that one is, from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, early on, I sort of felt like this was a Marx Brothers film.
Yeah.
Think back and forth. And I wondered how he actually wrote the dialogue so it was overlying each other. How he what that screenplay looked like. It must be interesting to see how he wrote that.
At least in a Marx Brothers film, you know, there are at least 3 minutes where Harpo plays the harp, and so you can relax for a minute.
And there was occasionally a musical sequence, like Everyone Says I Love You. In
Yeah, right. But this was just, there was no let up.
Yeah, it's unrelenting, and it can feel exhausting. I've seen this movie many times. I've taught it a few times, and every other time I watch it, I find it exhausting or invigorating. I had to run out to a meeting halfway through the film, and I came back to it, and I was like, oh, okay, I feel refreshed now. So to get the effect he wanted, just so you know what went into this, there was no multi-track sound recording. So he had the sound mixer on the set turn the various overhead microphones on and off as required for the scene, as many as 35 times.
Wow.
So it's
Oh,
all in
boy.
little pieces, Walter. I hope to do the same to you someday. Wonderful in a loathsome kind of way, stinkers. So this is all, they make the fighting look kind of fun, right? It's part of the genre, the subgenre, the comedy of remarriage. It flourished in the 1930s, according to Saul Austerlitz, as an end run around the Hays Code. How could movies acknowledge the obvious that adult men and women have sex when even married couples had to sleep in separate beds? The solution was the comedy of remarriage, in which a once loving married couple, reduced to acrimony, is brought back together by the prospect of the woman's wearing a suit. Of the woman's remarrying a solid citizen of the Bellamy model. It made being an adult look like fun, working, wearing a suit, even getting married. All of these could be rejuvenated by the prospect of constant, loving combat.
So this is, I'm reminded of the Philadelphia story and Cary Grant doing the same thing, not as frenetically. It's a different movie with
Yeah,
a
but he's
different
very good
style,
at
but
that.
it's that same remarriage thing.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And there's a
Cary
lot of
Grant-
those throughout.
Yeah, Cary Grant does a lot of that, fast talking and back and forth. He's very
Yeah.
good at that.
There's a,
It was a
Sorry,
very
go ahead.
fun movie too. I mean, there was a lot of energy there.
Yeah,
You just felt like they were active all the time. It was a very engaging in that way, I thought.
you're going to take a nap now?
Too jazzed up.
and it's all told, I don't remember which of you said this, but it's all told with sort of like these really lengthy takes, which is a way so that the conversation is spliced up. And if it was just like bam, 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 it truly would feel punishing. But he has this invisible sort of studio era defining style where there's a lot of deep focus, like everything is in focus at the same time. This is long before film noir would do that, long before it was made famous by others. Lots of mobile camera, like slow moving camera, like when Molly jumps out the window. He actually choreographs the other, the reporters in the room to move in such a way that they're not captured by that camera as it slowly moves as she jumps out the window. All in aid of the story. As you contrast that to somebody like Alfred Hitchcock, where it's flashy, flashy, flashy with lots of somebody's powerful or ominous or whatever they are. You shoot them from below with a nice long shadow on them, something like that. It doesn't get that heavy-handed in Howard Hawks. And so he doesn't quite get the same press that Hitchcock or others have gotten. So one question for you, who rules the newsroom? Who's in charge? This is Women's History Month.
Building.
Absolutely, absolutely. So The Guardian called this the movie that launched the careers of 1,000 journalists, convinced that newspapers meant flirtation, dazzling rapid fire wit, and lots of smoking, not to mention editors resembling Cary Grant. And remember, Howard Hawks rewrites Hildy's role so that he's a she and Walter's ex-wife. I want to read something to you really quickly from feminist critic Molly Haskell. I remember studying in film school. This is in a new book called Backwards and in Heels by the great critic Alicia Malone. So it's about women's history in film. There had been better parts for women during the studio system. Quote, this is Molly Haskell, what struck me was the irony of women having had so much more power when they were under the studio. They were, in a sense, chattel to the studio system, owned by the studios, and their power was restricted. They were typecast and women rebelled. But most of the parts really were good. They were featured and they were nurtured. Women were built up into stars whose personae carried over from film to film so that viewers could identify with them and feel a borrowed autonomy and independence. Certain women in particular, like Bette Davis, Rosalind Russell, Katharine Hepburn, represented a thrilling kind of outspokenness.
Mhm.
So yes, Roz Russell rules the newsroom. And let's talk about the newsroom, unless somebody wants to talk about the depiction of Hildy Johnson in this film.
I was interested by your observation of how many stars had turned down the part. And it would be interesting, you mentioned all these people who had declined to play the part and whether they were regretting that after this movie came out. But it certainly was a strong role, I thought.
Oh yeah, it made Rosalind Russell's career for sure.
And I could see Lauren Bacall or some of these other people in that role, but she did a
Mhm.
fabulous job.
Yeah,
I couldn't see Lauren. I couldn't see Lauren Bacall in a role like that because it's nothing that we know about her is that frantic or
Oh, yeah.
loudmouth or rapid talking.
She's a
so-
different kind of tough woman. She's more
Yeah.
laconic, right?
Yeah.
So the ones that turned it down were Katharine Hepburn, which makes sense, Carol Lombard, Ginger Rogers, Claudette Colbert, Irene Dunn, Joan Crawford, and Jean Arthur.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. A lot of people turned it
See
down.
Jean Arthur doing this role.
Oh yeah, she'd be wonderful. Although I can't imagine anyone playing it as well as Rosalind Russell.
No.
Well, and she didn't have anything to lose because she didn't have the other films behind her like the other actresses did.
Mhm.
So it's no wonder that this started her career in the movies because
Yeah, I mean, she really just had the women. That was her breakout role, and this was really her breakout role.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have to head out. So thank you so much, Alan. This is a great idea, and your expertise in film is amazing. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, you're very kind to say that. You're very kind. I just have a little more trivia, and then we'll be done here. Thank you for being here. So all they do is write lies. What are we talking about there? That's Molly in the film.
All the newspapers are still convicted of writing lies.
Yeah.
Right. So this is, it was a big thing back then to have newspaper films. It Happened One Night, Citizen Kane, Live Old Lady, The Sweet Smell of Success. They asked the hanging to be moved in order to sell papers.
Yeah.
What of the depiction of the news of the newspapermen in this film?
Well, they'll do anything to get a story.
Right. Very
Right.
exploitative. Very
Right.
exploitative.
So it sells papers, I guess.
Absolutely.
And the sitting around the table playing cards or whatever they were doing. There should have been a lot of drinking going on, but I didn't see it. It was sort of emblematic of what you think of in those old movies. The way the newsroom and the way the people acted.
Everybody smoking.
Yeah, everybody's smoking. And it also showed, I think, the playing cards that you mentioned, it shows their laissez-faire attitude to somebody's life.
Yeah.
Like everything's for the story, right? So it's kind of an indictment of that sort of side of human nature as shown through exploitative means. Any other thoughts on that or something else or anything else before I launch into the trivia portion of?
Well, the other thing that, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say two things. One is I've never seen this film before, and I thought I'd seen all of Cary Grant's films, and I'm a real fan of Russell as well. And I'll remember that, my first reaction when it finished was, I couldn't believe that Cary Grant could talk that fast. And even though we've heard him in other things, my predominant memory of this is how clipped and fast he talked. And I don't know how the play was reviewed, to be honest with you, Alan. I don't know anything about the front page. I think I've heard of it. But this film in many ways is so focused on words and the pacing of it that it's in many ways it's like a play, you know, where you don't have the ability to use a camera in any way. They're just out there, and it sinks or it swims based on their use of words. And I can't imagine who the actors were in the play version, but I don't think they could have excelled what we saw in this film.
Yeah, if you this will be added to the Hearthstone's collection in the next week or two. And if you check it out and watch some of the bonus features,
Yeah.
I haven't seen the play either, but the difference between the front page 1931 and this film, it's like a magnitude of 10. Like
Wow.
they show a scene by scene, and it's just like one person with a phone saying a few things and then somebody interrupting them once instead of
Wow.
like 6 people just all. It is absolutely astonishing. And I know the play was a huge, huge success. Like everybody loved this play. And it went on not just to influence, I guess writers consider it the most influential play of the 20th century in the way people write dialogue for film and for plays. I guess it changed things in a huge way, in a way that I didn't really understand before I was researching it this time.
Right near the end, he used his real name. There was an Archibald Leach
Archie.
Yes.
name stuck in there. I forget what he was referring to.
I like the way
Yeah.
the guy looks like Ralph Bellamy.
Yes. Yeah, there are a lot of inside jokes,
Right.
and I believe I know the Ralph Bellamy line was improvised, which I'll get to in a second. I'm not sure if the Archibald Leach line was improvised, but there was a lot of improv in this film. Remember, Howard Hawks was slunk way down in his chair, trying to disappear so his performers could bring as much as they could bring to it. And I have a little bit more about that as well. So the play had a famous last line, "The son of a bitch stole my watch." While the line and the plot points leading up to it didn't fit into His Girl Friday, they did pay homage to it by having the first crime that Burns framed Baldwin for be the theft of a watch. Walter and Hildy hiding escape killer Earl Williams in a desk in the city room was based on a real incident. Emile Gavreau, the editor of the old New York City paper, the New York Evening Graphic, hid an escaped killer in the city room of the newspaper, interviewed him, wrote the story, and waited until the paper was on the street before turning him over to the police. Rosalind Russell thought while shooting that she didn't have as many good lines as Cary Grant had, so she hired an advertisement writer through her brother-in-law and had him write more clever lines for the dialogue. Since Howard Hawks allowed for spontaneity and ad-libbing, he and many of the cast and crew didn't notice it, but Grant knew she was up to something, leading him to greet her every morning with, "What have you got today?" Right after Williams is found in the desk, the mayor tells Walter that he's, quote, whistling in the dark. Well, that isn't going to help you this time you're through. Walter says, "Listen, the last man that said that to me was Archie Leach just a week before he cut his throat." Archie Leach was, of course, Cary Grant's birth name.
Right.
Ad-libbed by Cary Grant, the famous in-joke about Ralph Bellamy's character, "He looks like that actor Ralph Bellamy," was almost left on the cutting room floor. Harry Cohn, the studio head, saw the dailies and responded in fury at the impertinence, but he let Howard Hawks leave it in, and has always been one of the biggest laughs in the film. Through Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell met her future husband, Grant's house guest at the time, 5 years her junior, and later film producer Frederic Bresson. So many critics, this is kind of how it lives on, many 1940 critics felt that Grant was badly miscast as Walter Burns and that Clark Gable would have been much better in the part.
No.
I know. Saul Austerlitz on the film said, quote, "The genre may have been birthed elsewhere, but the face of its emergent maturity is Grant's and Grant's alone." Of course, A Girl Friday is an assistant who carries out a variety of chores. The name alludes to Friday. Robinson Crusoe's native male dog's body in Daniel Defoe's novel. According to the Merriam-Webster definition, the term was first used in 1940, the year the film was released. Hawks returns with Sergeant York in between for Ball of Fire, which is a super fun film. I highly recommend seeking that out, with a Charles Brackett, Billy Wilder screenplay, where a group of ivory tower lexicographers realize they need to hear how real people talk and end up hiring a beautiful singer to avoid to help her avoid police and escape from the mob. It's an absolute classic with Barbara Stanwyck and Gary Cooper. The Screen Guild Theater broadcast a 30-minute radio adaptation of the movie in March of 1941 with Rosalind Russell and Cary Grant reprising their roles. His Girl Friday and the original Hector MacArthur play were later adapted into another stage play, His Girl Friday, by playwright John Guare, presented at the National Theatre in London from May to November 2003 with Alex Jennings as Byrne and Zoe Wanamaker as Hildy. And Billy Wilder, of course, revisited the film in 1974 with The Front Page. And in 1988, Burt Reynolds and Kathleen Turner starred in a remake called Switching Channels, which I can't imagine is very good.
Never heard of it.
So our next feature in Hearthstone University's film school is going to be Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen's Singing in the Rain, the best musical ever made. An extremely funny film also, and a history lesson on transition to sound films with Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, Donald O'Connor, and the sublime Gene Hagen. Anyone have any questions or thoughts before we end this recording and session of our film school?
I wanted to say that if it wasn't so funny, the language is so funny, the encounters, it's a pretty serious movie.
Oh yeah.
There is nobody in that film who represents any institution or anything like that is unscathed. The police,
Absolutely.
the mayor, the newspaperman, everybody is a fool.
You make an excellent point, Susanna. It's a scathing critique of all these institutions, and of the many notes I took, you can see my chicken scratch here. It's literally gallows humor. Like there's a gallows out there, and they keep cutting to it, and they're making jokes around it. So if you separate the content from the delivery, it is a pretty serious film. So that's an excellent point, and one I'm glad you brought up.
And the regular people don't even appear. One jumps out the window, and the other one, it's just oh, excuse me, have to take this.
That's okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks everybody. Anybody else have any final thoughts or
Yeah,
questions?
I just wanted to say that I think any of them could be receptionists at a doctor's office. If you ever try and figure out when they talk so fast what they're saying.
Some hard-boiled fast talkers, huh?
Yeah. And now
Well,
we're going to
how-
the dining room, and we're going to talk fast in the dining room. Jenna.
You only got an hour and a half.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you,
How
everybody.
often are you planning to do this?
The last Wednesday or fourth Wednesday of every month. So the
So one
28th
a
we'll do Singing in the Rain.
Well, Singing in the Rain is one of my 2 or 3 favorite movies of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I've
Mine as well.
probably seen it 40
Good.
times.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing you all of you there. Thanks so much for coming today. And I'm going to end it now, but thank you. I really appreciate the
Alan.
discussion. It's been
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you,
Alan.
Bye-bye.
Bye.